afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital platform featuring a variety of programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the Deputy Director of Events here at NCIA, and as always, I'm very excited to welcome all of our members and supporters to another edition of our Service Solutions Series today being presented by Simplifya. If you're just joining us, please stay on the lookout for housekeeping instructions to be relayed via the chat window so we're not taking up any more valuable time with routine info. But do know if you have any questions for our team on how to participate in this virtual event, please either message myself, Brian Gilbert, or my colleague, Brooke Gilbert, at any time via a private message within the Zoom webinar platform. Now, let's get this show on the road. In this edition of our Service Solutions series entitled The Road Ahead, Cannabis Compliance in 2021 and Beyond, we're joined by a panel of experts led by the team at Simplifya for a comprehensive look at the complexities of cannabis industry compliance and a look ahead to what changes are in store for the industry post-election. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome Amy Larson with Simplifya to the virtual stage. How are you doing this afternoon, Amy?
I'm good, Brian. Thanks so much.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us as always. Well, before we kick things off, why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about your own expertise and background before turning it over to each of the panelists to do the same?
You got it. Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Larson. I'm the VP of Marketing at Simplifya. If you're not familiar with Simplifya, we are an operational and regulatory compliance software platform. It's our goal to really help you guys make all these, compliance challenges a little bit easier, because we know that they're super, super frustrating and in-depth. So prior to joining Simplifya, I actually worked at a marketing agency here in Denver. So I've worked in the cannabis industry for about 5 years now. And I'm also lucky enough to be the current chair of NCIA's Marketing and Advertising Committee. So thank you all for joining us today. We've got some incredible panelists, and I'd like to ask them to each introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with my colleague, Brooke Butler. Brooke, if you could say a few words and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Brooke Butler. I am the Vice President of Partnerships at Simplifya. And I've been with Simplifya since right after we launched the product at the start of 2017, which is hard to believe. And before that, I spent a decade attempting to advise multinational corporations on how to invest in complex regulatory environments of emerging and frontier countries such as Nigeria, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines and places like that. But happy to be here and excited to share with you guys today.
Thanks so much, Brooke. Next, I'd like to ask Scott Hammond, who is the National Cannabis Practice Leader at MGO, to give a quick intro.
Thanks, Amy. Hopefully I'm coming through okay as I sit here in our darkened little film room. Hopefully it's feeding okay.
You're good.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Amy. Thanks, Brian, NCIA, and Simplifya for the chance to be on the panel today. As Amy said, I'm Scott Hammond. I'm a partner here at MGO. Also, I'm the Cannabis Practice Leader for MGO, and MGO is a national public accounting consulting firm. We've got offices throughout the U.S. and some in India as well. We've been involved in the cannabis space probably from some of the various earliest days, and we've been involved with some of the large go publics and some of the smaller startups, both plant touching and ancillary. So we touch a wide range of services in the industry. And one of the things we also do in addition to the traditional services, try and help the industry by participating in events like this or putting content out, including some of the guides we've done about going public, or most recent one, our field guide to M&A, helping companies get ready for an M&A transaction. So that's a little bit about us, and looking forward to participating, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Scott. And last, but certainly not least, Andy Montgomery, who's the CEO and founder of HDCS.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to be here. I'm, as Amy mentioned, the CEO and founder of HDCS, which provides compliance consulting to financial institutions for the cannabis industry or higher risk depositors. I came to the cannabis industry from a career in banking, a 25-year career in banking, which included starting a couple of banks from the ground up. So I'm very tuned to regulation and regulators, and what it means to be compliant from the cannabis business into the banking world, both today and what's likely to come down the pike.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andy. If we can go ahead and jump into it, we've got a ton of information to share with you guys today. Obviously, we were able to pull together, some great experts across the industry so that we can really talk about the kind of the state of compliance, as it touches, your operational and regulatory issues, banking and finance, as well as tax and accounting. So we really want to be able to give you guys a holistic view of what the compliance landscape currently looks like. So our goal today is really, we're going to talk about some of the newly legalized states and the regulations and compliance demands that they face. We're going to get some insights into the complexity of accounting and how to be prepared now that, the IRS recently announced that they are adding a cannabis team so that they can step up tax enforcement because, dealing with the IRS and cannabis isn't onerous enough. And then we're going to look at banking and, the change, the impact that a change in Senate power could have on banking compliance. The Safe Banking Act, the MORE Act is up for vote. So what a change in federal power at the federal level could have on banking compliance. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to hand it off to Brooke first, and she's going to chat a little bit about things from an operational perspective. And I do want to let everybody know there's a lot of information on these slides. So don't feel like you have to take notes or anything. We will make this available after the presentation. So Brooke, I'm handing it off to you.
All right, well, we shall overcome. A great time to be alive, and certainly a great and exciting time to be involved in the cannabis industry. I thought this was really interesting, so I wanted to share, but within 5 decades, the perception of cannabis in America has basically completely done a 180. Back, kind of right when the war on drugs started, about 84% of Americans thought it should be illegal. And according to Pew Research Center, 91% of Americans support legalization in some form now in 2020, which is pretty incredible. And with that, the joke after the election was, cannabis won the election. Every ballot initiative that was on the tickets passed, which is pretty exciting. We have 15 total states now that have legalized recreational cannabis, and that actually has made it to where 1 in 3 Americans now live in a state that has legal recreational or adult use cannabis, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. And so I wanted to highlight some of the states that passed and kind of what's going on with them. With New Jersey, they passed overwhelmingly, about 2/3 of their voters approved. Their lawmakers still have to pass legislation that will set up the regulations for the program to allow for retail sales. But their constitutional amendment does take effect on January 1st of next year. Recreational retailers won't launch right away, but as their licensing system is set up, you will see medical cannabis dispensaries start selling products to adult consumers. South Dakota, pretty incredible. It made history by becoming the first state to legalize both medical and recreational cannabis on the same day. Their recreational program, their law for that will go into effect on July 1st of next year. And their Department of Revenue have to develop the licensing regulations by April 1st, 2022. So it will be a while before you see recreational cannabis in South Dakota. Their medical program that also passed will be regulated by their state Department of Health. They have until October 29th, 2021 to enact regulations, and they must start issuing patient registration cards by November 18th of next year. Montana, didn't really think that one was going to pass, but was pretty excited when I saw it did. Adults will start being able to possess and cultivate cannabis starting on January 1st of next year. That same day, regulators could begin to start accepting license applications for retailers as well. In Arizona, the law technically goes into effect upon passage after the votes are certified in their state, which is expected to be on November 30th. And they can start issuing licenses in Arizona in January of next year. And the first retailers could potentially be approved by February 1st. So they're looking to move pretty quickly. And then Vermont actually was the first state in the nation to legalize cannabis by state legislator back in 2018. But it only allowed for possession, and personal cultivation and consumption. In 2020, Vermont legislature passed another bill that will finally allow the state to have its first licensed retail stores to open no later than May 1st of 2022. And then Mississippi, along with South Dakota, added to their medical marijuana program or legalized it. And the Mississippi Department of Health will be responsible for developing those regulations. They have to do that by July 1st of next year. And patient cards will need to be issued by August 15th of next year. So some pretty exciting stuff. Obviously, when it gets passed, these programs take a while to actually get going and operational, but really exciting nonetheless on that. And then Brian, you can go to the next slide. All right, well, all of that excitement leads to compliance. I always tell everybody, compliance first, cannabis second. It is one of the most scrutinized and regulated industries on the planet. I promise this is not fake news. I say this all the time and people don't believe me, but cannabis is actually regulated more than plutonium, if you can believe that, which is crazy. And this year we've seen, and we're going to see it into 2021 as well, states not only, cannabis businesses not only having to follow their state and local cannabis ordinances, but now also having to follow COVID guidelines and rules. And those have been changing what feels like to us at Simplifya literally every other day. They put something into effect, then something happens, and they get stricter or less stringent. And these cannabis companies are constantly having to evolve how they're actually running their businesses to be compliant with that. And with that said, cannabis was deemed an essential business and was allowed to stay open when many others were shut. And so that has caused there to be an even more closer look or scrutiny of the industry, and has really made it where there are razor thin margins for mistakes now, because there was a lot of people that said, well, I can't go to church, but I can go to the store and buy cannabis. That's not fair. And so they're looking for ways to complain and report these guys. So they really have to be careful with that. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be with us until we get these magic vaccines out. The other thing to think about, I always tell people is, especially in these new states, when you're entering a new market, getting a license is actually the easy part. It won't feel like that when you're applying for it, I promise you, but it really is the easy part. The hardest part of running a cannabis business is actually ensuring that every single one of your employees follow the exact same rules and do things the right way every single day. And that is not easy, especially when you think about the fact that we are an anti-authoritarian industry by nature. We are, state legal, but we're still federally illegal. And so you've really got to make sure that your team is really involved in a culture of compliance and aren't making mistakes that could be, costing you really hefty fines or even getting your license suspended or revoked. And then obviously, if you're looking to invest or even potentially get involved in a cannabis business or partner with one, you do need to keep in mind that the barrier to entry is quite high and are vastly different, not only state to state, but within those states, local jurisdiction from city to county. I always give the example in California of San Jose. That city has like more regulations than even the state of California. Whereas Oakland, right down the street, has like less than 30 regulations that people have to follow. It's vastly different. So you need to keep that in mind because the barrier to entry is different, not only state to state, but local jurisdiction to local jurisdiction. And then, speaking of the road ahead, cannabis businesses not only have to ensure that they're maintaining the current state and local regulations and be in compliance with those, but they really need to start keeping an eye on what will potentially happen if cannabis is federally legalized or descheduled, because that opens the door for entities like the FDA and other federal organizations to have their own hand in regulating cannabis, which is only going to add to more regulations and more barriers to entry and being able to scale your business the way that you want. It's just not a normal industry. It's difficult, but it's worth it. You know, that's why we're all in this. We love the plant. Next slide, Brian. So I wanted to give you guys a brief look at kind of what we've seen as far as cannabis compliance enforcement after states legalize. What you typically find, is once regulations are actually put into effect, the regulators sometimes don't even understand the regulations that they're supposed to be enforcing. A lot of the inspectors are ex-DEA agents, ex-cops. They maybe have never seen a CO2 extraction machine in their life, you know? And so you'll notice that like in Washington, when they started, there were, a small number of inspections, and then they really started to ramp up year after year after the program was more established, after there was more companies operational, and after there was more regulators that knew what was going on. And so you can see at the bottom, if you're violating the regulations, the regulators are eventually going to find out. So do not take the ostrich approach. Don't stick your head in the sand and just pretend like compliance isn't there or you don't need to do it. It's going to cost you. And then in Colorado, I wanted to show you kind of how fines evolved, because I thought this was pretty interesting. The first year after recreational cannabis went was legalized in 2013, there was 21 violations, but 0 fines issued. Why was that? Typically what we see in newly legalized states is they start off with what I like to call compliance through education. They want to work with you. They're learning the rules just like you are. And so if you are able to show them that you are trying to be compliant, they will be willing to work with you. Always be the good cop, never be the bad cop. Don't ever complain to a regulator or be mean to them. They will put you in the bad guy list and you're going to have problems. I promise you. And then you can see Colorado ramped up pretty quickly in how many fines were issued. And it's no joke. You can see nearly $500,000 in fines were issued the second year. And last year we had nearly $1.3 million in fines that were issued in Colorado. So again, take compliance seriously. You do not want to make costly mistakes that could cost you your valuable license or put your business under, because they're just hefty. I mean, we've seen 6-figure fines, and I'll get into that later, but it's pretty wild. So if you hear one thing from me today, take compliance seriously. They are going to be checking on you. And if you violate the regulations, they're going to find out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brooke. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you now real quick to talk about some of the compliance issues that we know the industry faces and some of the things that are going to be coming down the pike, thanks to our best friends at the IRS.
Yeah, I was going to say, as I was listening to Brooke talk through her presentation, she was talking about the involvement of federal agencies. I'm sure many people listening in today wish there was one federal agency that wasn't quite so involved in the industry, and that's IRS. They obviously have made life tough, and the rules and regulations make it tough on the industry. And as Brooke was talking about the fines and penalties coming from the regulatory side, unfortunately, we can add a 0 to some of her 6-figure fines and penalties, because when the IRS comes calling, we've seen situations where you're looking at 7-figure settlements, fines, back taxes. So these are, as Brooke put it, real numbers that can have not only a financial impact, but they can literally take you out of business and shut your operations down. So like all the compliance issues will be talked about today, it's critical you pay attention to this subset as well. We're going to focus on tax. And one of the reasons we're talking about it, even though it does get so much attention in the industry, is there is going to be an increased focus and pressure over the next year or two on the industry with a higher level of IRS audits. Now, they'll probably focus on some of the more traditional cannabis states, but I think you're going to see it rolled out across the US. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, the IRS has been doing some internal analysis and through some internal studies done by the Treasury Inspector, they've concluded that in some sample states and locations, they're seeing non-compliance by cannabis companies with the IRS rules and regulations that are running up into the hundreds of millions of dollars. And literally, 280E is probably the most common area of non-compliance, but there are other areas they're focusing on as well. So in response, they've been developing specialized training programs, mainly in California, Washington, Oregon, but also places like Nevada, Arizona, and Michigan. And we're expecting each of those states to see a higher level of IRS audits going forward. They'll probably focus starting with 17 and continuing up through any other open tax years, which would include 2019. And of course, as we move into 2021 and beyond, those open tax years will adjust accordingly. The other issue I'd highlight is that I don't think this focus is going to be limited to the federal level and the IRS. And I think many of us live, operate, work in states that have struggled as a result of COVID with some budgetary issues, or perhaps going forward in 2021, they'll start to see the impact. And I think it's a logical expectation that those states, whether through their traditional tax groups or through their cannabis control groups, will focus more on tax compliance than maybe they have in the past. And that includes not just income, but also all those sales, excise, and other taxes that the industry has to navigate. And as Brooke highlighted, that same regulatory patchwork quilt that we all have to deal with in industry state by state applies to tax issues as well, because of not only the federal regulations, but also state regulations. And then on top of that, when we're talking non-income tax issues, you've got both local jurisdictions, whether it's a city or county, that can overlay their own unique issues around sales tax, or in some cases, income, transportation taxes, cultivation, et cetera. So bottom line, this is an area that has justifiably received a lot of focus in the industry, but going forward, I think it's going to even up the focus a little bit more. So please be aware of that. Three big areas that we expect will be a focus: 280E. If we can go back to the last slide for just a second, sorry. If we look at these three little graphics on the right-hand side, just giving at a high level some of the areas of emphasis. So if you look on the lower left, 280E, no surprise, that has and will continue to be a topic of discussion. Would love to tell you that 2021 is going to bring relief from this provision. I think that's overly optimistic. I am optimistic, though, in the long run we'll get it. I just don't think it's going to happen in 2021, and I hope I'm proved wrong. The other item you see there also is management fees. That's another way you could talk about it is entity structure. A lot of us in the industry have structured our operations to try and avoid revenue streams getting sucked into 280E by setting up realty entities, intellectual property entities, or management companies to move some of that revenue stream out of plant touching activities. The IRS is really looking hard at that and taking a very strong position against that structuring where there's not valid business reasons. So that's an area they're going to be challenging as well. And then just classically, the ability to support deductions that you're taking, trying to reduce your tax burden. That's kind of a recurring theme as well. So Brian, if you could advance to the next slide, please. So given that no surprise, given that we're telling you this is coming down the pipeline, what are some things you can do now? Well, simply take a look at your positions, look at your current documentation, based on this presentation, discussions with your service providers or others like ourselves, trying to anticipate what those questions will be. We've talked about some of them, and we can get into more of those, either later in the Q&A or in offline discussions. If you think you're at risk, or if you don't think your documentation is going to withstand the rigor of either a federal or state audit, have an outside party come in, help you review your positions, see if they're technically accurate, and also make sure that your documentation, your memos, your support puts your best foot forward, and really try and buttress that and beef it up a little bit. And if God forbid you are selected for an audit, there are a couple things you should immediately do. One, from an internal political perspective, make sure your stakeholders are aware of it, because this can involve large sums of money, as well as taking up a lot of internal operating time and management focus. You want to get ahead of this and make sure the stakeholders are aware of it, manage your expectations, educate them on the process. There is a cadence, a rhythm to one of these audits, and you want to educate those stakeholders about it. You're going to want to have a primary point person in your organization. This will consume a lot of time, but it works best if you have one individual that bears the brunt and can kind of be a liaison between the audit team and your internal ops and management team. Ideally, they're going to have experience If you don't have somebody that's like that, still identify them, but maybe support them with an outside consultant to help them navigate that process. And then again, last one, just kind of the same thing, talk through all these issues about timing, expectations, and so forth. Bottom line, it's coming. Don't, to use Brooks' phrase, don't bury your head in the sand. You're going to be 10 times better off if you get ahead of this wave. Next slide, please, Brian. So we talked a little bit about tax. We're a public accounting firm. We deal with all sorts of finance and operational issues, tax being one of them, but we also work with Simplifya, on compliance issues, as well as when we're out doing audits or reviews or working with companies on operational improvements. We see, some compliance issues that seem to be a recurring theme, and some of them are very technical, some of them are very simplistic, but some of them are also kind of cultural or philosophical. And on this slide, we're talking about what I would call almost philosophical issues. So one, many times I think people treat compliance as kind of a secondary thought. And I think it's critical, if you're going to be successful navigating the complexity of cannabis's compliance environment, that you really view it as a core competency and you invest accordingly. If you treat it as a bolt-on or something that always is a secondary thought, you're going to get results you're not going to be happy with. You're going to have higher compliance violations. I would also suggest to you that if you approach it this way, you'll find that a compliance forward focus will allow you to make operational improvements that drive bottom line. So part of this cultural change is not just thinking of it as a necessary evil, but thinking of it as a core part of your operations and something that can drive profit, cash flows, EBITDA, etc. Part of that success is creating a culture, and that culture includes the philosophical things we talked about, but it also includes a mindset about documentation. Decisions are documented, they're memorialized, there's a paper trail. It's so much easier to support and document things in real time than going back a year after the fact and trying to explain what you did, why you did it, etc. Finally, for those of you that are plant touching and working with seed to sale systems, sometimes they're very difficult to work with. The vendors have had some issues with in some cases, and we all like to curse them occasionally. However, what we would suggest is that they represent a opportunity, not something that you want to avoid. I think you want to lean into and engage with your seed to sale systems. They are a source of tremendous volumes of data. And if you fully integrate them into your other operating systems, as well as your operating policies and procedures, I think, again, you'll find that they can truly drive not just compliance, a higher level of compliance, but also operational improvements and enhanced or improved bottom line results around cash flow, profitability, and EBITDA. Next slide, please. Finally, what are some basic steps? And so we started this talking about startups. And so if you're a startup, or even if you're an established operator, I think these things apply. These are some real simple steps. One, make sure the board and your other investors, are aware of your approach to compliance and understand the importance of it. Including when you're looking at building out your board or investors, at least strategic investors, you might consider whether you want to pull somebody from a regulated industry. I think you heard Brooke talk about her experiences. I think that's been informative for her as she's navigated cannabis. So people who have experience navigating regulated industries understand the importance of working with and keeping the regulators on your good side and other factors. We talked about the seed to sale systems and how important they can be to a strong compliance environment. So leverage your operating data. When you're looking at your results and trying to make improvements for financial reasons or operational reasons, always consider the impact on compliance. I would suggest to you that if you're seeing trends or variances that surprise you from a financial or operating perspective, you should really take the next step and look and understand what that might mean from a client's perspective. If you're seeing bad margins, is it purely a pricing issue, or are you having some underlying compliance impacts as well, control or other issues that are driving that or partially responsible for it? Finally, I've been in the industry long enough that a lot of the stuff was done with paper and pen when I first started. And it was taking the regs that came out from the regulator and trying to parse them and create some kind of processes and policies. So now we're blessed to have companies like Simplifya that have developed really strong operational compliance tools that make this so much easier and give you so much better results. So don't be afraid to work with the vendors in the industry like Simplifya that are bringing these tools to market. They'll make the task 10 times easier. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks for that, Scott. Andy, I know, why is banking so hard? Why does banking still be so hard?
Banking is always hard. So it's been a hard business from a regulatory standpoint for since the Great Depression. But going back to Brooke's point, a more regulated industry than plutonium. So I hope none of you drop out and start getting into the plutonium business with that. But the regulation, take it from someone who's dealt with a regulated environment and who has met with examiners over my entire career. To Brooke's point, it doesn't do much to complain about the regulation. Some of it is inane, some of it is very helpful and useful in establishing guidelines, but keep your regulators close and look at them as partners, and you'll find navigating through that regulatory morass is much easier. On the banking side, it's going to get harder before it gets easier, simply because we do not have federal banking regulation because it's not legal federally. So really when the federal regulatory apparatus opines, which is a group called FIFIEC, and they start writing the rules, what we think is that they're going to really focus on getting the illicit cannabis industry out of the banking system. They're going to focus on making sure that no funds flow through the banking system from illicit sources. And really, law enforcement sees it that way. That's why we think safe banking is inevitable. You've got now 34 attorney generals, state attorney generals from bipartisan states that are understanding that the one way that they can tamp down on the illicit trade is to use the apparatus that already exists in the banking system. So the banking system already has a regulatory apparatus that's designed to, in theory at least, to shut off illegal businesses and illegal funds. And so having the legal compliant cannabis industry go through that apparatus is going to be helpful for law enforcement officials, also for state treasurers in collecting more taxes, as they see the legal and compliant trade thrive and the illicit trade better enforced. So we think safe banking is inevitable for those reasons. Now we have a change in administration, which is going to be more friendly to cannabis, you would think. We saw in the past administration 2 different attorney generals and 2 different approaches, but we think this one will be more friendly. We still don't know what's going to happen in the Senate. The Senate is what's kept safe banking from passing, but there's a critical change even if the GOP holds on to the Senate. And that's one, a president that will sign the safe banking bill, and we're not, or don't have the uncertainty surrounding that. Also, the head of the Senate Banking Committee changes hands from Mike Crapo, Idaho senator who was opposed to safe banking or shelved it a few times, to Pat Toomey, who's a senator from Kansas, Republican, but says that he is very sympathetic to safe banking. So we think this confluence of events is going to really push on trying to get a safe banking bill, either through some cooperative stimulus bill or in a separate bill that gets introduced in the Senate and will be passed. So that's our hope. But again, I'm not in the business of predicting what Congress is going to do. What you should know, again, is if that gets passed, then the federal regulators write the rules, and then we're going to see some more significant regulatory rules surrounding cannabis banking. Next slide, please. So we all know the problems of the industry. Having an all-cash cannabis industry or even payment systems that work the way they are is not good for the industry. It's hard to get debt, traditional debt, and other financial services in the industry. So the industry really isn't performing to its full optimum level, the legal and compliant industry. And because of that, there's lost tax revenue. You've got a huge gray market, and that's creating some money laundering. So again, this is all pressing down now federally to have action to be able to have safe banking. Jelena McWilliams, the chairwoman of the FDIC, has
Oh, looks like Andy froze there.
oh,
Oh, there we go. We got you back.
on my back, my internet's a little unstable. So Jelena McWilliams, the chairwoman of the FDIC, has said that member institutions shouldn't have a problem banking cannabis as long as they follow the guidance that exists, the Cole Memo guidance, the FinCEN guidance, and have prudent practices in place. Next slide, please. So the landscape is still fluid. There's obviously, as Brooke mentioned, 35 different state laws that cannabis businesses need to comply with, depending on where they are. 12,000 different municipalities rescinded the rescinded Cole Memo, other agency guidance, FinCEN guidance, state banking guidance, best practices. The financial institution needs to make sure that the cannabis industry is complying.
Oh, we got another hiccup there, Andy.
Yeah.
Oh, there we
Are
go.
you back, Andy?
Yeah, I'm going to make it quick because my internet got unstable. So if you go to the next slide. So there's guidance that exists today for banks to comply with. California's probably got the best. And so I think if you're looking for how you comply in the banking world, start with the DBO guidance in California, contact us and we'll give you an idea of what you're going to have to comply with both today and what you can anticipate complying with to have banking relationships or full service banking relationships. But we do believe that it's coming. It'll be more competitive, and that'll include more debt opportunity also.
I think we've got one more slide, Brian. There we go.
Again, we talked about this, is these are the regulatory agencies. Again, the primary mandate coming out of Congress, we believe, and through the Simplifya regulatory guidance will be to eliminate or reduce the illegal cannabis business that's flowing through the system, especially the banking system. And so we think it'll get more onerous, not less onerous for the financial institutions.
I think federal legalization regulation, regardless of what it looks like, it's going to make it more onerous for us, whether it's banking or the FDA or USDA. But anyway, thanks so much, Andy. We do have, we've got about 15 minutes left. I do have a couple questions in the Q&A, but I want to kick us off real quick. Brooke, I know, partly from, the data that we see at Simplifya, partly from your experience in the industry over the last 5 years working with, regulators and agencies and operators across the country, what are the most common compliance mistakes that people should be prepared for and kind of double check to make sure they don't make, especially as they're opening in a new market?
Yeah, so, the biggest ones, because they're the easiest for regulators to see because they're either visible or they have access to them, starts off with traceability. It is very easy for a regulator to go and open their computer, log into Metric if you're in Colorado, and see who's missing some inventory. And then they can go right in and get you. And just to let you know what you'd be up against fine-wise for some of these common mistakes, a company in Colorado was fined $75,000 and had its license suspended for 90 days for failing to maintain accurate tracking records that accounted for, reconciled, and evidenced all inventory activity. And if you're a really bad actor and you try to not trace all your product and divert it, there's a wide range and severity of consequences, and deliberate diversion results in license revocation and fines up to $150,000. Packaging and labeling is another huge one that we see because in large part, it is a public kind of safety issue. Regulators that don't want kids to be able to get, a hold of your cannabis edibles. And unfortunately, packaging and labeling regulations tend to change frequently. I used to make a joke with some of my friends that run a dispensary that, stickers are your best friends when it comes to labels, because you have to put new symbols or new fonts over the old package, over the old labeling to get in compliant when things change very quickly. Those are pretty big. Recently, actually, a really popular Colorado edible brand was hit with a 6-figure fine for their packaging and labeling violations. So, staying on top of that, even though it might require you to throw out some packaging product that you bought in bulk, is going to cost you far less than paying a 6-figure fine. Security, another big one, because it's so easy for them to spot. Do you have the right amount of cameras? Are they facing the right, places? Are you backing up your, security and recording logs, sometimes for upwards of like 90 days in some states. But those are big. And in Washington State, as an example, 10% of their violations last year were for failure to maintain required security alarm and surveillance systems. In Colorado, it was because people had inadequate camera coverage or inadequate security for recording devices. So that's an easy one because they can easily just check to see if you have those cameras and everything in place. Obviously, expired licenses. You'd be shocked, but that is commonly seen because you have to have local permits, state licenses, and a vast variety of other types of permits and licenses. As well as in many states, there are mandated employee badges or licenses, if you will. And in Colorado, when the industry first got started, the 5th most frequent fine was actually employees having expired licenses or badges and working. So got to stay on top of not only your business licenses, but also your employee badges if you're in one of those states that require it. On that,
Brooke, that's really great. And I think it's evidence of, just it's what we kind of assume are basics. People aren't going in and being sneaky trying to find stuff. It's kind of the very visible stuff. One of the questions I wanted to ask for, kind of for you and for Scott and Andy as well, and then I'll hit the Q&A, is, obviously this year was crazy with COVID. I mean, at first it was, everybody was ordering online and it was like curbside delivery. And what kind of violations, what do you think are going to be the biggest issues coming out of COVID that people are going to face on all fronts?
So in Nevada, they've been fining their retailers like crazy for COVID violations. And what they've been fining them for was when they catch employees not wearing masks, they were fining them $7,500. And then, as I was mentioning with COVID, with the regulations changing every 2 days, there was a period where the state was not allowing direct sales at a store. It had to be done by direct delivery. And they were issuing fines in the amount of $12,500 to companies that were still allowing sales that were not done by direct delivery at that time. So those are just a few examples, but they're definitely out there. And again, you've just got to stay on top of your local municipality and what they're announcing as far as those guidelines.
Right. Scott, do you have anything from an accounting perspective that you would add to that as it relates to COVID?
Yeah, I think certainly she did a good job of summarizing. We see much the same. I think what kind of if you want to focus on more of the finance accounting stuff, we are seeing as a result of some of the changes in those business models driven by COVID rules, like more of a delivery focus and so forth. You're seeing situations where in some jurisdictions there's a transportation tax and things like that operators aren't picking up properly or calculating properly. So I'd call it almost a trickle-down effect where you've got the initial COVID regulations or changes for public safety and employee safety, and they start trickling down through the system and through operations and having a wider range of impact. In this case, on a failure to properly calculate, transportation taxes, because now you're doing more of your product delivery via a delivery system versus in-store sales. So things like that.
Awesome. Andy, were you able to rejoin us, I think?
He's muted.
He's muted.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Awesome. I can. And actually, I'm going to ask you one of the questions that came in through the Q&A.
Sure.
And that is, what do you think will happen, if Congress passes the Safe Banking Act? What impact will that have on the FinCEN guidance, the FinCEN memo?
Well, I think the FinCEN memo will be just incorporated right into the guidance. So that's been the standard for financial institutions, for financial practices in dealing with cannabis. So you'll just see that guidance codified as part of the broader regulation. Okay,
great. Another question that I wanted to kind of open up to all of the panelists to ask or to answer is, what are you most optimistic about? I mean, compliance in cannabis is never going to be fun, but as we move forward, what are we most optimistic about? Looking ahead, looking to the future.
For me, I think that as the industry grows, you have more and more people that have expertise and have dealt with this type of operating environment that is very different than any other industry. A lot of times the regulations and what they make you do aren't very logical or aren't best business practices that you'd see elsewhere. And so I think that you're going to see more knowledge share expand to these newly regulated state or legalized states, where you're going to see more, markets get to maturity a lot faster, which is exciting. There's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge that they can share now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I'll make two comments. And the first one's perhaps not on topic, but it's driven by the fact that I live in Sacramento. Today is the NBA draft, and I'm optimistic that the Kings will finally make a good draft choice and not screw this one up. So that's point number one. Perhaps more relevant for today's topic, I am optimistic that as the industry continues to achieve what I'll call critical mass, that some of the regulatory changes that Andy and Brooke spoke to will happen. I think if we go back 3 years ago, there wasn't the, what do you want to call it, the electorate numbers, the population numbers, whatever. There is definitely momentum and mass, and I'm much more optimistic, although some of this won't happen in a year, that we're going to get there sooner than later. And that makes me very, very optimistic going forward.
And I will not share Scott's optimism on the Kings, but I will say to the point about critical mass and to where the industry has evolved to, it's been fighting with some hands tied behind its back and not having leverage or not having some of the cash management resources, some of the other opportunities that other industries have in helping fuel the growth. So when we look at, 68% of the voters, we have hit that tipping point that we'll see an acceleration of the business, and then hopefully it'll operate similarly to other types of businesses or industries in the United States.
Wonderful. Well, I don't have, we only had a couple questions come in through the Q&A. So if anyone wants to offer any last minute, parting notes, parting suggestions, we'll take a couple minutes to do that. And then I think we'll wrap up.
Well, I'll add one more thing I'm optimistic about. I am looking forward to not being a criminal in my home state of Texas, hopefully in 2021. Shockingly, I think they have 3 different initiatives they're trying to get passed. And so Texans won't have to drive and illegally divert cannabis from Oklahoma pretty soon, hopefully, which is happening quite a lot, but, can't really stop them from doing it. But I'm excited about that. And
awesome.
I think, Scott, I'm a Spurs fan, and we are not going to win a lot of games this year, but we are going to look great in our new uniforms. I'll leave on that NBA thing.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank all of my fellow panelists. I want to thank all of the attendees. Thank you to NCIA for hosting us and for allowing us to have this conversation. We kind of joke that nobody really gets into the cannabis industry because they love compliance, except for us. And we do love compliance. And I think I can say that for everyone on the presentation today. And, it's my gut feeling is as we move this industry forward, as we continue to destigmatize and normalize, it's going to have to be the adherence to compliance, the commitment to customer safety, to the rules and regulations that are going to prove to those who are still doubters that we are a legitimate industry. And that's going to be one of our biggest selling points, I think, moving forward in gaining acceptance as this industry continues to grow. So thank you everyone for joining in. If anyone has any questions, our contact information is on the screen, and we would love to chat with all of you. So back over to you, Brian. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Amy. I couldn't have wrapped that fantastic conversation up any better, so I'm not going to try. With that, as always, we do want to leave all of you all with a few previews of some upcoming activities within NCIA's portfolio that we'd love your participation in. The Simplify compliance resources, just a quick note, like Amy mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, please do make sure to follow the prompt to fill out our attendee survey post-session. That will grant you immediate access to a PDF version of our presentation file, and then you can follow these compliance resource slide to specifically follow and download these resources that they've compiled for you here. All right, perfect. So in case you all missed it, we held the live days of our first event, our first ever virtual conference, Cannabis Business Cyber Summit last week. Don't let that FOMO set in though, as the entire event is now on demand until December 10th, and participation is complimentary for all NCIA member businesses. So if you didn't have the time on your calendar to participate in the event last week, please don't hesitate. You can log in to participate by heading to cannabisbusinesssummit.com at any point. If you have any difficulties logging in and redeeming those complimentary tickets that are allotted to you underneath your membership, please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone here at NCIA. And if you're looking for a quick overview of the Cyber Summit, our marketing team just posted a fantastic recap blog on NCIA's website, which covers the over 150 plus hours of educational programming, along with all the other really amazing activities that took place during the summit, of which all of it is now on demand for the next 30 days. Not ready to take the plunge for membership? Well, you can secure a non-member pass to participate in the summit for the low cost of $49. And then while you're browsing around all that amazing content, you will be convinced as to why you need to join NCIA. So from there, make sure to join NCIA and support us into our second decade of operation. And with that, I do want to thank all of you all for participating again, and a huge thanks to the entire team at Simplifya for sponsoring today's Service Solutions session underneath of our Industry Essentials educational webinar program. As the speakers leave the virtual stage, we'd love for all of you all to stick around for the next few moments or few minutes while we highlight all of the 100 plus companies that participated in today's session. Stick around for the next 5 minutes. We're going to have an alphabetical credit sequence highlighting all of the participants in today's session, and we'll leave the room open for the next 5 minutes for you to get that follow-up conversation with all the panelists. So think of this as that moment of coming up to the stage at the end of the panel conversations at our conference. We love all of your all's engagement over the next few moments, and we look forward to seeing you all again for another Industry Essentials educational webinar next time.
you.